Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Chaz. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay.
Are these meetings usually attended by a bunch, or
Yeah,
is there?
usually, but I have to say I didn't send out a reminder this week, and so I'm not sure what kind of maybe
Ah,
we have a lot of people on even by now. Um, but that's okay. I'll talk with whoever's here, and this meeting, this one's about tools integration, so it'll be a part two that I will send a
mhm.
reminder for. So we'll probably get some good information to seed that meeting, the next meeting.
Yeah. I looked at my meetings for related to Simon, and I saw I didn't have one for June, so I looked on the schedule to see if there was one because I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know for that reason.
Yeah, I got hit with a little bit of a, I don't know, a cold or something this week, so
Oh,
I'm not feeling well.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's been 2 years, you know.
Yeah, that goes with not. That goes with the easing of restrictions, right?
Right. And my daughter going back to school. Yeah.
Oh, how old is your daughter?
She's 15.
Wow. Okay.
So she got back to high school, going into school, and yeah, that probably did
Hmm.
it. So we'll get started. I usually wait about till about 35 after to get started, give people time to come on from other meetings. But I'm glad you made it because yeah, Bazaar integration, there's probably a lot of good lessons learned from that, huh?
I'm learning lessons. I'm not sure what you're learning on your side.
I'm sure. I'm sure we've learned some things too. So Michael and Greg, I was just telling Chaz that I didn't put out a reminder for this meeting, so I don't know that we'll get the turnout that we usually do.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Well,
It's okay. We have this slated for 2 meetings, so I think what we'll do is get a good idea of what people want to talk about, and then we can do a deeper dive in the next meeting. Welcome, everyone. Glad you're coming. As you're joining, we'll get started in about 3 minutes. But glad you can make it. Hope everyone's enjoying their short week, work week, that is. I think that's another reason this one might not be as attended. People are taking extended breaks around the holiday. well, this might be the crowd that we have today, and that's fine. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you were able to make it today. I was telling other folks, if you just joined, that I didn't send out a reminder for this meeting. So I think between that and the holiday, we're probably having low attendance, but that's okay because we have 2 meetings dedicated to this. So I think talking with a smaller group might help get some good information for some deeper dives in the next meeting. So there's a lot to kind of go over with regard to tools integration. And by the way, this is real casual, informal meeting. If you haven't attended before, just, chime in whenever you think of something, because this really is a brainstorming session to get ideas and for functionality, for tools we want to develop, for how we want to develop things in the new system, Torus. This is just a few examples of what I consider to be integrated tools. And, we have stat tutors, the classic stat tutors in our statistics course that are CTAT, created through CTAT. And then we have virtual labs, like PhET simulations and things like that we can embed in our courses. And we have special custom activities that we've created as a result of needs that didn't exist already in our applications. So some vision about where we want to go and where what we'd like to see happen with Torus is we'd like to have somewhere in the authoring environment that helps wire up these tool integrations or provide a connector, someplace or somehow where we can have a place where you can embed new types of activities or see if what would work with our system. We want to think about build versus connect. So I'm saying like wiring up existing external tools versus building new ones. We want to have kind of a vision for both of those scenarios. We want to make sure that when we include any kinds of integrated tools or new custom activities, that they are data rich, meaning that we want to be able to collect the data from those tools whenever possible. And I would think that that's the goal of most of you guys as well. Eventually, we're going to be leveraging LTI, the latest LTI, as a tool integrator. So, we're developing Torus openly and using the latest LTI, such that folks hopefully would be able to build external tools and then connect them up into our system very easily. And I'd like to see this idea of a rich library of domain targeted activities that people can use in various courses that they're developing. So some discussion points, and again, this is a two-part meeting, mainly because there's so much that we could be talking about and thinking about. So what kinds of tools do you integrate now? What kinds of tools would you like to integrate but haven't been able to? What are these trade-offs between lightweight, meaning just like embedding something, like in an iframe, versus really tying it and getting that data stream from it? What should our priorities be with regard to custom activities and tool integrations? And what does iteration on those look like? Is that something that's done frequently? And if so, how can we best support that? There's this idea of developing adaptivity and adaptive lessons and tools that support that. So what are those kinds of things that you want to be able to do in the courses? And then what I'm most interested in is in terms of an ongoing process for, how we vet external tools or get some capacity to be able to integrate new tools as people think about them and have ideas for them, or have tools out there that they want to integrate. I can imagine a day when we, when our our platform and our courses are pretty stable, and then we are really about kind of integrating new kinds of tools and activities into our courses, making them very engaging and different and but also sustainable. So I put these discussion points out there just as a kickoff, but I really want to hear from all of you about, oops, you know, what are the kinds of tools? So Chaz, you came on, and I completely forgot about Bazaar until you were on here, but we went through a pretty extensive integration with integrating Bazaar with our into OLI, and I think we did that through Torus. Is that correct? Or are we doing that in the regular OLI delivery system that we have now?
I believe it's the regular OLI. Raphael has shielded me from a bit of that, but I believe it's the regular OLI. He's unfortunately not here today, of course.
Right. So what are some, I hate to put you on the spot, but I mean, it's really just a discussion to really get an idea of what were the pain points through that you know of, or what were the challenges that we might want to try and, you know, think about now so that we can provide a better and easier way to do it in the future.
A pain point is not coming to me right now, but what is coming to me is your question 3 about trade-offs versus lightweight versus deep integrations.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a new client, Guru, who wants feedback through the LTI affordances for student performance, and that's the sort of thing that's just I don't think would be available with a lightweight integration, and currently it's not really available with a deep integration either. I mean, with the current depth of our integration, we just it's minimally, it's called assessment and grade service or something like that. And right now there's just a one versus 0 for participation or not in the activity. Just basically, if they connected to the activity, that's a 1 that they participated. So to help, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for those sorts of services coming back to whatever the LMS that's coming in is, because teachers, wherever they are going to want to have it within their one system. So,
right.
So that's, to me, that's something that we're missing right now, and we really need. I think that I may be working with Raphael shortly on that, as a matter of fact, for Guru.
Oh, that's great, because then we'll learn some things from that. That's great. Thanks for offering that up. So I'm gonna call on people now. Michael, are there types of tools that you'd like to see better integrated that we haven't been able to do yet?
I'm not sure. Yeah, actually, I guess the sandboxes. So I do use code sandboxes extensively. And it'd be nice to be able to attach a skill to a code sandbox. So I could have a complete knowledge mapping.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's not really I guess it's not really a tool so much as a feature on, like, when I integrate a web page, can I say this is a skill associated with the web page?
So even now, like, you can embed in an iframe like a web page.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'd want to be able to tag that with a skill. So is that like is there an activity in that
Yes, there is. There's definitely activity. I have them either doing a code snippet, or they're writing a small routine, generally. Yeah. So it's all embedded, and actually, I have the source code for the code sandbox. So it's open source. I downloaded and installed it on my local server. So there's potential that I could even, if there was some integration capability, I mean, there's potential I could do something a little more, but I'm not sure what it is right now. If I want to have multiple steps, I could do multiple skills, but it's because it's code, it's kind of hard to apart.
Right. So then the least you'd want to at least apply one skill to the overall activity.
Yeah.
But if there's a way to do finer grained skill mapping, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the idea of tool integration in a way, is to be able to, collect data from these external things that we wire up into our system. And so, yeah, I can see that being a need very easily. Great, thanks for sharing that.
Sure. I'll go hide away.
Okay. I don't know, what are some other things? I know that I was talking with Norm yesterday, and we were imagining, there's tool integrations like Bazaar or like these code exercises, but then there's also custom activity development as well that I'm kind of lumping together with this. And I can imagine a day when we have a number of these kinds of requests coming in, and some tool integrations are really I would say easier than others probably. And so once we have a whole lot of these coming in, I don't know, can you help me imagine how we might be able to have a space where it's kind of easy, or like a workflow, or I'm not even sure what this would look like, but I mean, it's fun to envision, like, with nothing that exists already, what would be the ideal, right? And again, I don't have a lot of deep knowledge of coding or how these tools actually wire up, but so what are some things that we have to consider when we do that and have available?
The first thing I think of with a custom activity that is not just it can't easily be scripted is the user interface.
Yeah, that is first and foremost, right? So explain a little more about what you mean, like a user interface to be able to make those connections as we author, or the user interface of the tool itself, and
yes,
how. Go ahead.
Yes, the user interface of the tool itself. You can be endlessly creative with that, and then you have to connect that to the underlying knowledge representation. But for custom activity authoring, I guess we're thinking of something like, I don't know what I haven't used CTAT. I don't know what it's doing these days for creating an interface. I'm sorry, I'm a bit ignorant in those terms. I come from Carnegie Learning, where we had quite elaborate interfaces and similar underneath as CTAT has probably. But it's easy to stamp out activities that all look the same. But for authors to be able to create whatever they want and then connect those user interface elements to the underlying knowledge representation seems like a big part of doing this.
Yeah, and you just mentioned something else that's interesting that I'd like to see, maybe, is a way to, if you see a custom activity or particular integration in one of our courses, to be able to maybe copy that and change some of it, in terms of authoring, so that you could customize it for your particular domain, but like, you can see something and say, I want something like that, but you don't want to start from scratch, and be able to make it easier for others to copy and customize.
That's a good idea. A library of templates.
Yeah.
And then once someone makes something new, they can add it to the library of templates.
Yeah, I like that. I know I don't want to put everyone on the spot here, but it is a discussion type of meeting here. But Lauren, if you're listening, I know you guys use this embedded survey, which is really interesting. So you have the survey has a Likert scale, right? And then it actually, after the students go through it, it generates a report. How easy or hard was that to incorporate? And do you even know? Or was it something that you kind of said, here's what we envision, and we made it happen?
I think it was the latter. It was, this is what we envisioned and you guys made it happen. If anybody on the call is interested in using that survey platform, it's actually incredible because it allows students to see kind of their responses in real time.
Mhm.
So this survey was developed for us for kind of showing students in real time how their deep and shallow study strategies kind of measure up, and generating a bar graph for them immediately for them to see where, you know, where they were kind of leaning too heavily on shallow strategies and not enough on deep strategies. So I mean, you guys basically did all of that, and that's incredible. And in addition to having sort of this multiple question Likert scale survey, there's also, you can also just do one question at a time, which is great. So we didn't really have any difficulties because we weren't the ones engineering that. But I feel like that survey, we've actually leaned more heavily on that in the last semester. We've actually added single questions that are part of the survey throughout our entire toolbox, which is something that we hadn't intended to do. So I think that, you know, one of the things about these tools that you're talking about today is often they are developed for one purpose, even within a given course for a given, you know, given group, and then you end up using them in different ways. So that sort of adaptability is incredibly helpful. And to be able to, you know, cut and paste that between courses, I can also see the utility in that very much.
Oh, thank you so much for all of that, for describing that. And yes, exactly. So there's this idea of custom activities that, you know, we want to build them in such a way that they are reusable, you know, across different domains. So you asked for a very specific thing, the survey tool that where, you know, students can fill out a survey and get the results right away. But again, you can imagine it being used many other places with just, you know, changing those questions and, you know, having someone else be able to take that same functionality embedded in the course that they're developing in a different domain and be able to still use the shell of that same functionality and activity and change maybe the questions or how. So what's interesting is you said you're now doing that throughout the course. So when does the, do you tally up the results and give a report at the end for all the questions throughout, or or does it generate the report for just the questions that are right there?
So the clear intention for us from the beginning was to have them do the study behavior inventory at the beginning of the course and the end. And then we also have them answer reflection questions where they evaluate how their projected study patterns for the future will change based upon the course. But what we also did was we used your survey tool, which can also function as just one survey question, to put that at the end of each part one module, because students in the gradebook were saying, I don't know if I've completed this. There's nothing to show in the gradebook. So we are actually using your survey tool for what is kind of an unintended purpose from the beginning for us, which is to have students see a check mark in the gradebook at the end of sections that don't otherwise have questions. So that's what I meant about how sometimes these tools are designed for one thing and you totally use them for that. But then you think, oh, well, this is an easy workaround, so I don't need to receive 50 emails from students about whether or not they completed part one. They just answer a question. So that's kind of what I meant about how they're adaptable in a way that you don't see. You allow for as much flexibility as you can when you're developing, but you don't even know what that will turn out to be later. But I did have a question about these activities in terms of thinking about what to do in light of the fact that accessibility needs are only on the rise, and accessibility expectations are absolutely, you know, they're very high and they should be.
That's
so
right.
Our group in particular was thinking about this. Jenny Jenny, the other team member who works in the editor, was developing an activity where basically you would be able to fill out different parts of the brain, and you would type in your answer, but that was based upon visual recognition. Like I'm able to see this part and this part and this part and this part. And so we were wondering, well, wouldn't it be great if you could hover over a different quadrant and it would actually start talking to you? So I guess what I'm wondering is, what do you see in terms of where this is going, especially in terms of visually impaired and people that are having difficulty using the keyboard, for sort of future development of adaptable activities? Because I see adaptable not just in terms of different courses, but adaptable in terms of, okay, well, let's think about visually impaired or people that, you know, have trouble with the keyboard.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I didn't even think about that in terms of this meeting, but it's such an important point that if we're going to be doing all of these custom integrations and custom development, we want to make sure that we have some sort of way of making those accessible. And that's and like you suggested, really something like just adding an audio clip, being able to add an audio clip in there to as the accessibility, or as the what would be kind of alternative text now for an image, say, you know, and have it audio. I wonder if that's even possible now. It's just not something we do, you know what I mean? But it might be something we just turn on. That's interesting. But and excuse me for a second. For those of you who joined late, I got a cold this week. So forgive me as I keep pausing and coughing. So accessibility is something we need to really capture in terms of custom activity development and integrations.
I think there are automated affordances that go with HTML pages. Or you can at least use, some of them may be totally automated and some you have to program in, but then you can, alternative text, I think I've seen it even, alternative text for an image, or something to support a screen reader. I haven't done that work, but I know it's in use quite a bit.
Yeah, and we have ability to do that for other, you know, things that we've developed that we know are used throughout a whole course, but we hadn't thought about it yet. I think for custom activity development, I know we're starting to. For example, we're trying to figure out an accessible way or accessible version to still do like a drag and drop type activity. And it might be we have to completely rethink it, how they're done. You know, we have to have a drag and drop that there isn't a drag. You know what I mean? Like there has to be the ability to toggle through it and make selections based on with a keyboard.
I've seen like click and click, you know, as opposed to having to drag to us.
Yeah,
Makes it a little easier.
Interesting about that, and you know, on a little bit of a side, if you can point me to an example of that, because one of the things that we're struggling with is the instructions for that, so that they're nice and simple for a student.
Aaron, you're amazing. I've only heard you cough once, and you also deserve an award for powering through. The show must go on.
Thanks.
The examples I know about are all Carnegie Learning user interfaces, and so you probably can access that.
Okay, yeah.
Steve Ritter.
Right. That's great. Thanks for that. I'll definitely look into those, because we're constantly, to Lauren's point, I mean, we're trying to be very forward thinking in terms of accessibility with Torus development, for sure.
And I think that would be the main obstacle for us. So if we were to say, oh, I'm really excited to use this new activity, the only thing that would stand in our way is if we thought, oh, this wouldn't work for a particular group of people. That would be a reason that we would say, you know, we're not going to use that in activity. Whereas if, like, for example, we really are interested in this sort of like being able to hover over different parts of the body and have the system talk to you at the same time for people that are visually impaired. So, you know, if we can't get that to work, then we'll actually decide not to use that activity, because that's how concerned we are about accessibility. So that's the only reason I brought it into this conversation about like really cool new learning tools and adaptive.
Right, right. Well, I can imagine that we could provide, if we're going to have a place where we can do custom activity development, we provide a little checklist for them at the same time that says, you know, is this accessible, with ideas about how to maybe make it more accessible. If we're going to really have heavy custom development, like kind of available and authoring available to external users, and it's not something we just do for them, you know, anymore, which is what I'm thinking, where we want to go. So I'm actually really glad you brought it up, because it's something we really need to think about constantly as we're developing this system. And it's also, how do you make decisions about maybe external tools? We get requests all the time, like, oh, we found this cool thing, can we embed it in the course? And you know, we say we'll take a look at it and see how it would work in our course, and if we can build that connection. But we might have, you know, one of the first questions we might want to ask is, how do you expect, you know, it to work in terms of adaptivity, or I mean, accessibility, to help people make a decision, a better decision about what kinds of things to integrate or not. Because if we make it very easy for people to integrate things, then we want to make sure that they're thinking about that accessibility piece as well. We don't want to just fill our courses with a bunch of cool stuff that only some of the population can use.
I was also not sure, like, when we request some sort of, like, I'm not the one who does the data requests at the other end. I'm the implementer in our group. But I think that sometimes, when you do the data requests, if you have a custom tool that's also utilized in the course, I think that those data are maybe like separate than the main data requests. So that, I'm not sure if that's how it still works for the survey. I know that's how it originally worked for the survey. So that's the sort of thing that I was thinking, oh, you know, in your discussion questions, is there anything that like makes getting the data a little bit harder? And I think that when a new learning activity goes in and it's like brand new, I think that that's like a hard thing, is to integrate it into sort of the main data dump.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, at one point, and again, I don't know what it's like today either, but at one point you had to like actually do the data request for the course and then say, oh, by the way, we need the survey data too, to make sure that because it wasn't all together. Interesting. And that's something we would definitely want to be better at, is wiring these things up so that you get a data stream from them, and maybe even an interface that helps determine what interactions you want to collect in the data. Yeah, those are all great points. It's this data collection that we're so much about, and I think is the most challenging part of these tool integrations, which is why I think sometimes we go towards more custom activity development, because then we have more control over what we can actually wire in and collect data from. Yeah. Are there tools that anyone can think of on the call that that they'd like to see integrated more, like something that you and that you haven't been able to quite do yet? No? What are some steps to think about as we want? So say we find some LTI tool that we want to connect up to our system in some way. Can you imagine what are some of the things you need to think of besides, accessibility, data collection? Again, me being naive in how this is done. What are some things that we should think about in the step-by-step process, or things that we need to, that would help us to decide whether it's worth the time and effort to do, I guess, too. So I'm trying to get at more of like a process, or kind of a decision tree almost on how we make the decision to wire it up in a lightweight versus deep manner.
This isn't a process, my comment here, but it's a piece, something you may need to collect, is to understand what data the external tool needs, in addition to what would normally be provided. I know that with our new Bazaar integration with this external company, Guru, there's some, Raphael is planning to do some automated group formation, and for doing that, we need to have some custom fields, like the group size, the minimum group size, the timeout to go from the desired group size to the minimum group size. So, and I don't know whether there's such information the tool might need. Student characteristics, something like that would be something to consider, I guess, that external tools might need something more than the standard, just kick it off with the student.
Right, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Bazaar, it's sort of a peer-to-peer. I'm probably going to do a bad job at describing it, but it's a tool where students can work on a particular work product together, and it has a chat, it has a bot that helps nudge students along, it has a workspace where you can embed any kind of shared document or other things. And so there's a lot when you go to embed that tool. It's a good example to think about in terms of how it's going to be used, and what other things might need to be built to support it even better within a class or within a course, right?
Good job.
I'm just going to look at the chat here. Old David. Experts in custom. Hold on 1 second. I gotta cough again. It's one of those situations that once it starts, well, it just gets worse and worse. Because I was fine until I came on this call. That's funny. So the delays and extra work for OLI team involved in exports and custom components is a big issue. Yeah, so David, are you talking more about like the data flow and getting those?
Yeah, so it's showing up with 3 different things for us this time. One is, so virtual lab data. We had an issue with just open-ended problems when the student writes a response, but the instructor has not yet graded it. To get that out, so it's all in there, but just it doesn't come in the normal export. So then you have to make a special request for an export, and it puts a lot of extra work on the central team.
Mm-hmm.
The more we can get away from that. It's also like delaying the research. We have collaborators that for weeks now we've been saying, oh, we're trying to get it. And part of that I think might be thinking, like, we have programmer time. So if there's a way, if it was more transparent, or we meet with people directly, so it's not a documentation issue. If it were possible when someone adds a component themselves, they have the ability to add things in a way that it will be in the standard export to data shop. That would be high on our priority list.
That's great. Thanks for sharing it. I think that's a popular sentiment in terms of, when you wire these tools up and embed them in the course. I mean, part of the reason you're using an OLI course is because you get the data. And so you expect to want to get the data from those customized tools and integrations as well. I can imagine, so help me here, because again, I'm not a programmer. I don't know how this stuff works. And if this is possible, maybe this is too pie in the sky, but can you imagine, I think what we'd like to do is even build like maybe an authoring interface where you can make these connections. And wouldn't that be ideal?
Yeah. So I don't really, so again, it's the excitement. I think it's something that it has a technical solution, but it's not so simple that it's so easy, it's easy to do. But because the data, there is a way to do the export that does cause this data to come out, and it's well formatted, everything's fine with it. It's just that the process of pulling that out of the central database and making it available is somehow involves human intervention from either Gene or Raphael. And it's hard enough that it has to be done by them. And then that puts them as a bottleneck. And I'm sure, it's to make that more efficient, the more projects that want to do this kind of thing, this could become even worse and worse for them, I think.
Yeah, so it sounds like a priority, and just hearing all of you speak to this point, a priority would be to be able to easily get the data out of tools that already exist and are integrated with OLI, right? And then next priority would be to understand how, well, first of all, making that a little more automated, that export ability, so that you can get the data from whatever you have in the course, whether it be, because I think it's still a very human process to get the exports from just the OLI courses in general, let alone the special tools that are embedded.
That is true. But it's not as, the turnaround on that is much faster than on these ones, so it involves a lot of extra work to do the export.
So then, the first priority would be able to get the data out in a clean way, easy way that doesn't involve a human. And then, but also included in that, if there's going to be an automated way, to include any integrated activities that you have as well in that export. And then next, I can imagine, is being able to, wire that up yourselves in a way, so that if you do embed a FET simulation or a lab in the chemistry course, to be able to just have an interface that says, okay, I'm going to want to collect, this is kind of the data that it provides, this is the data I'm going to want integrated into the rest of the data flow. Yeah, that data is so important.
Unfortunately, I have to head back to my other meeting. We're doing the kickoff for our California Learn Lab
Oh,
project.
great.
Work,
fantastic. Good luck.
Sorry,
Thanks
we
for
overlap.
dropping in.
All right. See you, everybody. Bye.
Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Aaron. I think part of the solution to that is going to be embracing standards like XAPI, and each type of activity or instrumentation will need an XAPI profile that will kind of say what kinds of statements are going to be collected. And then once that standardization is there are tools that will, there are even open tools, but it also makes it easier to build the tools to automatically get the data out and not require specialists to pull the data.
So I think, to your point, if we're using some sort of standard and everyone knows what that standard is, then it's pretty simple to build an interface to help people understand and kind of select the data they want to collect from any given tool that we integrate, right?
Yes, and the different activity types or different kinds of instrumentation just have the profiles built in. So it just makes it, you don't have to custom wire things. It's just there.
Do you think, in terms of standardization, do you think that we need to provide multiple types that we select from, or do you think we have to just settle on one and go with it?
No, well,
Is it possible?
there's different layers of standardization. So if it's in terms of the data logging, it could work with multiple standards at once. So it could be, if in an LMS environment, IMS caliper is an option, and in a more distributed model, XAPI tends to be the one that is preferred in some cases because it has a separate learner record store rather than feeding the data back to an LMS. But they're very close in structure. So one product or piece of software could support both. And then the profiles, again, if you have a profile for an assessment item or for a certain kind of lab activity, once that profile is defined, there could be a caliper version of the profile and an XAPI version of the profile. It really is, the profile is just defining what kind of click events are we capturing, and what kind of learner actions are we grabbing and storing in the database.
Thanks for that explanation. That's helpful, especially for folks who aren't familiar with this world of standards. So that's something we want to prioritize as well, is standardization and or selection of standards to use. Great. Sorry, I'm going through the slides here. So I think you guys have all given us a lot to think about in terms of, we could probably have separate meetings on a lot of the components of integration that we brought up today. And I'm wondering, let me see if there's any of these discussion points that we haven't quite touched on yet. I mean, our priorities are the data, right? I think that's the number one. How many of you, in the past, it's been very easy if you guys wanted a custom activity or something, like Lauren was suggesting, you kind of give us your vision and we kind of put it together. I want to do way more of that in the future. I mean, I can imagine a time where the course content, I mean, the idea is that course content kind of remains stable in such a way that we're iteratively improving on it. You know, you're not just throwing everything out and starting over. You're using the data to improve courses. And we want to do the same with any kind of custom activities or integrations as well that we have. And now I lost my train of thought where I was going with that.
Said you wanted to do more of that.
We want to do more of that. Thank you. And so I'm imagining a time where my team of learning engineers isn't just developing content, but we are developing these custom activities or helping with the tool integrations even more, way more than we do now. Now it's like a specialized, we consult the software team and they carve out time and do what we think will be very impactful. But we want to make this a platform for research as well. So we want to be able to integrate different things and determine their effectiveness or determine other things about those tools. Is there any research component that I haven't touched on in this meeting that we want to support in terms of, A/B testing, which will be a meeting down the road, but just in terms of using different kinds and embedding different kinds of tools. I'll pause there so I can cough.
Yeah, I think that our group is particularly interested in that because we're collecting tons of data, and we are very interested in the future in basically randomizing whether or not students are receiving a particular version of our student cognition toolbox that has a particular set of activities or a replacement set of activities, or there's an activity in one place instead of another, and looking at whether or not that makes an impact. So I think that, yeah, for our research purposes, we are very interested in how that would look and how that would work. So I would be very interested in exploring that.
Great, thanks. And we'll definitely be getting more into all the different components that are needed to support A/B testing in a future meeting. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, with regard to tool integrations, I was just thinking exactly that. Well, not just A/B testing, but are there different, you might want to test two different types of tools in two different environments. And if that's happening, they're going to be collecting probably different types of data. So I'm just kind of rambling here to try and think of other things we need to think about in terms of tool integration.
I could answer Tanvi's question.
Oh, yeah.
So the XAPI approach uses a separate learning record store, and it is pretty lightweight. So pretty much any kind of activity. So you could think of a web page with a form on it and a couple of buttons, and you can instrument that so the learner clicks on a button and you send that click and the which button the learner clicked on and when back to the learner record store. The learner, and this could be from any device, whether they're logged into an LMS or a platform or not, because it can be instrumented at the activity level. And it's being used in some really interesting ways, for example, by the US military, where they're instrumenting kind of these real world training situations where they might have a squad that is practicing an activity to rescue someone from a terrorist or something like that. And there are certain procedures that the squad, there are efficient ways of communicating between squad members. So they're instrumenting the communications of that squad leader says something. Does the member of the squad respond in a certain amount of time in an appropriate way? They're instrumenting things like they don't want soldiers to be pointing their weapons towards each other because that's a risk. So they're instrumenting the positioning of the weapons and which direction they're pointing the weapons, and whether they're firing the weapons at appropriate times. There are commercial applications and military applications where someone might be wearing an augmented reality headset, and the augmented reality headset has instrumentation that is keeping a record of what additional information a person is seeing through the headset, and also how the person is interacting with the physical. Let's say it's an instrument panel on a ship, and maybe they need to maintain something on an instrument panel. And so there are overlays provided by the AR headset, and Is the technician touching the right instrument at the right time to fix the problem? Things like that. I don't know if maybe I said more than you wanted to hear, but that's kind of the general idea of XAPI.
Yeah, this is super interesting. Thanks for just elaborately explaining all these different examples. It actually just widens the scope of the tools and the kind of tools that we might want to integrate in the future. So thanks for explaining this, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the future of tool integration and what kinds of tools we might even want to integrate in a regular course. What we think of online courses now could really change in the future when we start wiring up virtual reality activities and things of that nature. So this is all great stuff to start thinking about now, because we want to be able to support the future integrations like that. So, yeah, thanks for explaining that and giving some good examples that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, there's some really interesting examples in the military. They're really pushing the envelope. One that's interesting is a sniper isn't as effective if their heart rate is too high, because it affects their so they'll instrument heart rate and things like that, so that to know if the sniper is learning how to control those physiological functions. But there's just this a wide opportunity of ways of instrumenting with Internet of Things, and I know there's work at Carnegie Mellon on instrumenting classrooms, and so it's an exciting time.
It is, and I didn't even think of that aspect either. I usually think of these things very separate. Our online courses are instrumented one way, classrooms are instrumented in another way. And wouldn't it be great if we could combine that data without having to have like separate exports and someone actually like munging it manually? And maybe we even start with, since we do have these types of instrumented classrooms at CMU, we could probably start there with trying to experiment with that kind of integrated systems and data collection from them towards the same outcomes, towards the same learning outcomes. Very cool. So I'm going to probably call this meeting pretty soon because I'm going downhill fast. But so in light of that though, I'm going to, again, we're going to have a second meeting on tool integration. What are some discussion points that maybe I didn't capture that we want to really dig into, and so I can advertise for it a little earlier and have a really rich discussion around? Are there certain topics that you guys would like to see us tackle?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was thinking about testing these tools in different environments and how we might want to support that in the future.
Testing tools, that's great. Yeah. Thanks, Charlie. Lauren, did you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking about how we could work with flexibility of the appearance of these tools. So one thing that, for example, we would like, Jenny and I were talking about it yesterday or the day before, it was Jenny realized that the only way for students to see feedback for the quizzing platform, for example, was basically to request that they see the feedback. And so in terms of these, new tools and existing tools, like some flexibility in terms of when students see feedback for all different types of activities.
Okay. Great. Anyone else have any other discussion items for future meetings? Okay. Well, I really appreciate you all coming, even though I didn't advertise that we didn't get a huge crowd. I loved seeing that you guys all showed up and it gave us some really good things to think about. And it will definitely feed into the discussion and things that we'll talk about in the next meeting. And then I'd also like to probably maybe show off Torus again and some of the features that have been developed so far. It might be time for a new show and tell, considering we have made some progress. So that's a teaser for the for the next meeting. So please come. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts with us. The next meeting will be July 2nd, another like right around a holiday, but hopefully we'll still get a good turnout for that. And yeah, we're going to continue this discussion about external tools integration. So really appreciate you coming, and please come to the next one as well.
Hope you feel better, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thank you. I hope so
You're a
too.
champ, Aaron.
I'm going right to bed after this, by the way.
Good.
Okay, bye everyone.